Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just click the link in the show description to support now.
Are you interested in angels, demons, ghosts, spirits, and monsters? Are you curious about their origins, influence, and how to protect against the unknown? If so, then welcome to Southern Demonology, the podcast that explores all of this and more.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.
Welcome to It Takes Energy, presented by Energy Transfer, where we talk all things oil and natural gas. Oil and gas drive our economy, ensure our country's security, and open pathways to brighter futures. When it comes to meeting the world's energy needs, more is better. What we mean is our world needs a wide range of energy sources to meet our increasing needs. Just wind or solar won't get us there, as the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. With our growing population and the increasing use of energy-demanding technologies like AI, reliability is key, and the reliability of natural gas is unmatched by wind and solar. That doesn't mean we all can't work together, but natural gas is vital to ensuring we meet our energy needs. Look around, and you'll see the essential role oil and gas plays in our lives. Our world needs oil and gas, and people rely on us to deliver it. To learn more, visit energytransfer.com.
Hello all, welcome back to Southern Demonology. As always, I am your friendly neighborhood ancient demonologist, JJ, and today I have another special treat, but a phenomenally extra special treat, one that I have been looking forward to for quite some time. Just to give a little bit of backstory, around 6 months ago, I would say, I ran across a particular paranormal team's TikTok channel and grew very intrigued, and I reached out on a hunch, just hoping I could get an interview, and they were very receptive. However, due to my strange interview schedule, they had a lot of things going on. It took a while to connect, but we finally did. And we have had some phenomenal conversations back and forth. And I cannot wait to introduce y'all, the leader and the founder of this team today. I am speaking with Chelsea from Team Haunt Paranormal. And I think that you are going to enjoy the conversation. Even if it's a fraction of what I have, then I will consider that a total win. How are you doing today, Chelsea?
I'm great, and all sentiments returned your direction.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. And I will have to send you the $20 I owe you for lying about that. But
not a chance.
Let's just go ahead and get things kicked off here. Tell me who you are and how Team Haunt Paranormal got started.
Well, I'm Chelsea, and Team Haunt Paranormal got started because I had, first of all, I'd always been kind of spiritually sensitive, even when I was young, as far back as I can remember. And for my birthday, almost 14 years ago now, my friend Trina got me tickets to go on a ghost hunt because she knew I was interested in the paranormal and that I was obsessed with all the programming. And so she brought me on a ghost hunt. And afterwards, I quickly began organizing a team and buying gear. And by the way, our team is mostly close friends, family, and nieces and nephews.
Well, and I think I've mentioned this to you before, just this morning, in fact, but the one thing that I really love about you and your team is, one, everything that you do seems to be very deliberate, from the production quality of your YouTube shows to the way that you go about it. It is the most scientifically orientated approach that I have seen. And that's why, one of the many reasons why I wanted to speak to you today.
That means the absolute world to us. Thank you. We tried.
Let's go into a little bit about your journeys, shall we say. Was there ever a moment early on when you thought this might not be a great idea?
I probably should have. However, I didn't experience that anything but thrill. And maybe part of that's because our team never provokes, and our experiences have been mostly adrenaline producing and joyful and core memories. However, this last year I had an experience that made me wonder if it was a terrible idea. And it's not something that you can prove to someone else. It was just a personal experience I had at a location that shifted my gears. Do you want me to tell you the story?
I would love to hear it, please.
So we were invited to do Granite Falls, not just their museum, but multiple buildings in their very old and historic town. And we love doing museums. We went out like we typically do, and we pre-screened the locations. We met multiple owners. We talked to people in town to hear their stories. We kind of get an idea of how many team members are we going to need? How do we stay separate? All those the CAM plan, all that. We go out, we check out the venues.
If people are not familiar with the location, can you give just a little blurb about it so people feel up to date?
Certainly. It's a town that is nestled in the North Cascades, right at the foothills. It is beautiful. It is old. It was one of the old railroad towns way back in the day. I can't remember the years. We visit so many locations, so I don't want to spout off when the town was founded right now. It'll be in the video we're going to release later this year. But what I can tell you is when we went through, it was just, the museum was stunning. And we actually had activity on our walk through with the owner. Oh my gosh, you're going to love this. The owner of the curator's name is Freddy Krueger, and we did our investigation on Halloween. not satire, and he's wonderful, and he gives you really clear history of the town when he talks. He's just wonderful. And we're this is going to be beautiful. The interviews were some of the best we'd ever had. Just really solid people, really solid stories, great history given. And we were psyched. Well, we came back on Halloween, and what we hadn't counted on was they had changed, of course, as museums do, their exhibits, but they dressed a whole bunch of mannequins from the 1800s and 1900s, early 1900s, in creepy costumes from the 18 and 1900s. And so you walk in, and first of all, we're oh, that's not the cinematic appeal we'd first imagined, but this is it's going to be a Halloween episode anyway. So this is fantastic. Great opportunity. It's going to be a scary episode. And our team's super into horror movies, and we love the adrenaline and all that. So this was, we were pumped. But as we're walking in, unloading, there's just this weird feeling I have coming in through this corridor leading up to where we were going to set up and put our haunt hub and where we're going to start the investigation. There's several dolls in that attire I told you about. And one of them in particular, I immediately felt terrified of. And that's not who I am. And I'm not the type in general to jump on our shows or things. I'm not saying we've never been frightened or had something fall and spook everybody. I'm just saying I've never just walked into a venue and felt mortified. And we hadn't even started yet. And I walked in and I said to Andrew, I'm something's wrong with that doll. And he goes, what? It's a cool doll. He even walked up and snapped a selfie with it. And as I walked past we didn't have, all the lights on yet. And of course they're going to go back off. But, I'm walking through the dimly lit hallway past it. I heard, am I allowed to swear on this podcast?
Oh, yes, yes.
I literally heard the word bitch whispered to me in my head, not as if it was an EVP, but in my head. And you've seen our channel, we don't put a whole bunch of subjective random experiences. We try and really limit that. I don't even know if I'll talk about this on the episode, because we try and put what we can measure mostly. Not that we won't say we felt a particular way, but we're really careful with not making our individual experiences the episode. We want to put forward what we can measure. But I'm telling you, it was bone chilling, and I've never had anything like it happen. And then while we continued our setup, Trina was setting up Haunt Hub because Tally was out of town. She's getting the screens like for our static cameras set up. And all of a sudden, like, we're not, anywhere near record mode. And Trina's like, Chelsea, come here. What is this? And I come over and I look at the 4 screen. It might have been a 6 screen that night. Can't remember. But there's this weird light flashing on one of the screens. Again, I haven't, got my bearings at that moment. What cameras where? I don't, A lot of times I don't personally know that till we're in review and editing. We'll be like, okay, you number the cameras and decide what was what and how you're going to call them. She's just getting the screen set up and turning on cameras. And there's this full figure flashing, like a full figured apparition. And it goes across the screen and then disappears for a moment. And then we both look at each other like, what was that? And we're like, where's Andrew? So we start saying, Andrew, where are you? Can you wave? And then we see him way in the background on a different camera. I don't remember which one, but nowhere near where this was occurring, waving. We're like, well, it's not Andrew. There's only 3 of us on this particular investigation. And we look back, and then the same light up, flashy, sort of like see-through, how you typically see an apparition, but like illuminating light, walks into that freaking doll and disappears. The doll that I told you about. Creepy, like witchy doll with the horrible attire. And I was terrified the rest of the night. I wouldn't let the team leave me alone. I didn't do any isolation. I had the heebie-jeebies. Even Trina was a little uncomfortable with it. But that was the only time I thought, for several days afterwards, I'd never had something like that happen where something spoke to me. And it sounded like it was in my head speaking for like a couple seconds. And it took a couple weeks for it totally to go away, but there was a couple days where I was like, what just happened? What did we get ourselves into? And then eventually I got over it and let it go, but it was weird.
That is absolutely crazy. I have had something speak to me in my own head, and it was the most painful experience I think that I have ever felt. When you heard this thing say bitch to you, did it seem almost like an auditory experience minus the sound, or?
Yes, a sound, but like in my brain, I don't know how to explain it. I've heard people talk about this. I just never had the experience before. I think Tally once had it back at Manresa Castle or something. I've just never experienced anything like that. And it was weird. You could auditorily hear it, but it was like as if I was hearing my own auditory thoughts. I'm a musician, but it was louder than that. I still heard it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that is absolutely fascinating.
What was your story?
Oh, mine was, I was in Japan working, and I was up very late working at night, finally fell asleep, and I lived right across the street from a very sizable graveyard in the midst of Tokyo. Now, there's a lot of superstition within Japanese culture that you do not walk past graveyards because things will follow you back home. Mm-hmm. And I've lived my entire life in graveyards, and I went, yeah, whatever. So I would always walk past it. And then one night I fell asleep, and there was this being, and I can't even describe it more than that because it was translucent in my head, that was banging on the glass doors, screaming a word at me in Japanese, but I didn't hear it. It was almost as if it was pumped straight into my brain. And every time it said it, there was a flash of pain that radiated throughout my entire body. And I finally woke up, and I woke up to my earthquake alarm going off on my cell phone because I was there shortly after the 3/11 incident with Fukushima Daiichi. But I remembered the word, and you want to dismiss this as just a dream, and I understand that. But I ran to my dictionary. Actually, I didn't understand what it was, and I looked it up. And sure enough, the thing that it was screaming was "hairu," which means to enter.
Oh, wow! Okay, that's fascinating and super intriguing.
It scared the ever living crap out of me, and from that day forward, I had little dishes of purified salt right by that patio sliding door window. And I never walked past that graveyard again. So yeah, it was lovely.
Unless it was an invitation. You enter.
No, this thing
He's
was
like, no, this was not an invitation.
this thing was banging on the doors
Okay.
like hard to get in. So no, it was anything but. It may be an invitation for me to die, I think. But yeah. But anyway, enough about me. I know people that listen to this podcast have heard this story probably about 5 times now, and I apologize for making everyone.
I enjoyed it.
But so to continue on, if you had to explain what you do to a skeptic, what your team does, what would you say?
Okay, so I wouldn't hyper explain what I do to a skeptic because, well, it depends. An open skeptic, I would share that we're trying to gather scientific proof of other dimensions, what some people call ghosts or spirits or entities, other realms. And I would explain to an open skeptic how we do it. I wouldn't explain myself or waste my breath on someone who's just a skeptic or a mocking skeptic because they're not interested. It's kind of like relating your political ideology to someone whose values are different. You're probably not going to have a meeting in the middle. If two parties are open and like willing to hear one another on both sides, that is different. And I've had those conversations. And then it's a matter of explaining gear and process or inviting someone who's an open skeptic to come. And I have 2 contrasting stories. One is our team member, Danielle, who mostly watches Haunt Hub. She'd been my friend for years and she'd watched our videos, but she was kind of like an open skeptic and like, I don't know. So one time I invited her on an investigation and it was I think her first one was at the Everett Historic Theater. And it was a fairly active night and it left an impression on her. And afterwards she's like, okay, now I'm more of a believer, but I don't know what exactly I believe. And so she was less skeptical, but still wanted to like come again to make up her mind. The next investigation after that was our Georgetown Seattle Drum School investigation. And we had some crazy things happen. And after that, she became like, I want to be part of the team permanently. I want to come to everything. She really enjoys like watching the 4 screen, like just watching what's happening on the static cams. That's kind of her favorite thing to do, or to help us with managing, making sure we don't ever cross into each other's territory, manages, the walkies and things like that. So there's a positive open skeptic situation, different situation. The first time we went to the Tulalip Indian Reservation and were invited to, I think it's called the Port Susan Adult Club. It's like at the Port Susan where a bunch of people live part of the year. On the reservation, there's this very, very old building that's fairly haunted. Actually, I think the whole location's fairly haunted, very well documented. So, and the first time we were there, they made us have a whole bunch of rangers. They didn't make us do that this last time we came because we'd been there and they had a good experience with us. And so they left us more freedom to do our work. But this ranger mocked us on that first time, our entire setup. He was like, so what does this do? And what does this do, girls? So should I watch for you? Screaming, like mockery to the point that it was difficult to set up. It was very uncomfortable. And I was sitting there like, how's this night going to go? But we did talk to him like, hey, can you stay downstairs? And he intended to, and he did stay downstairs, mostly out of the way once we started the investigation. And we started with a level of activity. But Tally and I went to this, they have a bathroom. I don't know why so many venues have like haunted bathrooms, but it's a real thing. There's so many haunted bathrooms. And in this particular location, there's a haunted bathroom in a very spooky library, old library that like even on our walkthrough investigation had like banging on the door, like banging. And so Tally and I are like, let's start over there. And the 2 of us are in there and the light turned on by itself. I can't remember all that happened. It was like a light went off by itself. The spirit box had gone off and there was a scream physically between the 2 of us. Something else happened too. I can't quite remember what it was, but there was a physical scream. Like we were sitting shoulder to shoulder inside this bathroom. And there was like a yell between our heads, like an audible woman yelling. And both of us went, oh, and we stood up and we were like, oh my God, what just happened? That's the craziest thing ever. And then like there was banging. And so the ranger hears this commotion and he comes into the room, hands in his pockets, and he does that like super toxic masculinity stride towards us with his hands in his pockets. And he's like, oh, did something scare you girls? And so we started to explain to him what was happening. And you can tell this is someone who doesn't believe in anything. Right. And he's like, oh, is that right? And we're like, yeah, that's what happened. And right then the lights started turning on and turning off and turning on and turning off right where he was standing. And he says, He goes, this is above my pay grade. And he walked out the door and never returned. They had to send a different ranger back for the rest of the night. And Trina said that he later, like, literally quit.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh
he just up and left.
God.
So I sort of feel like sometimes skeptics, I think people are skeptical of things that they cannot, where they're at right now in life, personally hold the belief of. Like anything they can't perfectly explain is too much for them. They have to have the control or a definitive answer. It certainly made him uncomfortable and he left.
The entire time you were explaining that, the only thing that came into my head was the old cliche of the father of a family who refuses to believe in anything that may be going on if they're living in a haunted house and would go to any lengths to help kind of like try to explain it away. Yeah, that's the only thing that popped into my head. But wow. And I don't blame you about only wanting to engage in open skeptics, because you can only have a dialogue if both parties are willing to sit and listen to each other. And that makes total sense.
Yeah, and for our team, this is a bonding experience. We're not trying to get famous. We're not trying to make money. This is something we do 2 or 3 times a year, and we try and do it really well with the hopes of somehow scientifically proving spirits exist, and mostly to ourselves. But if we can bring an audience along for the ride, that's wonderful.
So you've mentioned a word that I'm not quite familiar with twice, and I know it has a particular meaning for you. Haunt tub. Can you go into a little detail as to what that is?
It's basically, it's our hub, Haunt Hub, Haunt-Hub. It's where we set up all our static screens, where all of some sort of like leftover gear sits at, the walkie-talkies, safety gear, keys, if venues are letting, having us go to multiple locations or rooms. It's just kind of the hub where our static equipment sits.
Okay. I figured that was the case, but I didn't know if there may be more to it. And thank you for elaborating.
Ghost Adventures has Nerve Center. This is our Haunt Hub.
Gotcha. I like it. I like it a lot. What's the one investigation you still think about alone in the dark when the house is creaking or it just gets really spooky?
So we investigated Concrete. Once again, this is another place where we did multiple venues in a town. Their Chamber of Commerce contacted us, and it's a very haunted town, multiple haunted locations. So I want to clarify before I highlight this one venue that the entire experience there stuck with me and was a blast. And they also do a ghost walk every October. So I suggest people go check it out. It's really an incredible town. The Mount Baker Hotel, where they put us up during our 2 nights there, there was a murder that happened at it back in the early 1900s. Like a woman drowned her daughter. I don't think they know which room it occurred in at this point, but we had the hotel to ourselves while we were there, with the exception of one room, like downstairs on the back. We were upstairs and we had like the whole front half of the building, and the owners for the most part weren't there. They certainly weren't there during the investigation. It was a really cool time to do a hotel because for all intents and purposes, it was empty because they were remodeling. We had all kinds of spooky things happen there, but when we were just chilling, getting ready to go downstairs and investigate the hotel, so the hotel hadn't been on our list of venues we were going to go to. We arrived in town and the chamber had rented the hotel for us. And then the owners found out that, we're a paranormal team, and they're like, well, will you do us as well? So we're like, well, we'd have to do it on night 1 because we're not going to have time to squeeze it into night 2. We already had our camera plan and who's in what building at what time. So we're like, okay, we'll just go down literally in our pajamas. And we did, in our pajamas with like root gear, not even our cameras, because we didn't want to burn the batteries or the roll for the next night. So I think we just brought like cell phones and stuff to do a primitive investigation. And while we were chilling, just eating dinner and relaxing, getting ready to do this, the building made a few sounds. You have to say there's no one in this building. And then there's just pounding on one of our walls. And when, most paranormal investigators have had knocks here or there, or even a time where a wall was pounded. Maybe even you see, where it's moving when this happens. But this was like the most aggressive knocking I've ever heard. And it lasted for like 7 seconds. It was like, boom, 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 boom. And we all just we're like, were we loud? Did we make someone angry? And we were also weirded out. We were even too scared to ask. And at that point, we didn't know we were the only ones in the hotel. We knew that we would be the only ones downstairs and in their basement when we investigated it. and as far away from anything auditory because we had the entire front half of the upper hotel and they put us in the suite. Goes across both sides. When we finally got brave enough to go down and find staff, there was one of the owners down there painting, and we're like, did like any guest complain about us? Let me backtrack for a second. We knew it was paranormal when we heard it. It was just so aggressive. It was like we even pounded on the walls in our room and we couldn't come close to making that loud of a sound. It was abnormal. But they're like, you guys are the only ones here. There's a couple of fly fishers on the back side of the building downstairs, but they're literally out at the river. And so they even sent us the text of this later because we made them before we added this to our video. Prove that these people weren't just annoyed that we were talking too loud. And they sit back. No, they didn't hear anything. They weren't there. We also had been downstairs when we finally did the investigation a few hours later. We could hear footsteps in the room above us. You couldn't get to that room without us knowing. These are like early 1900 steps. They make the loudest freaking noise on earth. Footsteps come out of nowhere and walk over our heads. This is on camera. We caught this and we're like, wait, that's her room. There's just something walking through our room. And every board has that old creaky floorboard spooky sound. And so we go down to the basement and something runs down the stairs. You can hear it run down the stairs where we are. And to this day, I can just hear the eerie footsteps that go to nowhere.
I've heard a lot of stories of people that talk about hearing footsteps up in an attic or in a location that's above you or running downstairs. First, what do you think is able to produce those sounds with no physical attribute to them?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions you've asked so far. Our team has a theory that ghost spirits, entities, I don't know what you want to call them, that a lot of entity types seem to manifest primarily in sound. I don't know if they manipulate sound waves. It seems to be that. Or if instead of physical bodies, they have sonic bodies. I am not certain. But we have found that there is so much activity that is wrapped in sound, or even during our welcomings where we sit and tell the ghost, hey, here's who we are. Here's our equipment. Here's how it works. So much activity starts then, but a lot of it's them talking over us. We'll be just can you hand me that? And you'll hear some sort of voice over the top of you. And it's manipulated somehow. Kind of like the spirit box too, right? Is another example of, I think that they can, I think some type of spirit at very least can manipulate sound waves. I also don't know if some of those steps, knocks are time loop replays, stone tape, but this was happening on command. We were investigating. I'm sure it's a mix. I don't know if that was a good answer.
No, that's actually a really fascinating answer because something that I thought of this when I was a kid. And I still keep coming back to it. And I'm not sure if it's just outright stupidity on my part or not. And I wouldn't doubt that it is. But we occupy the four dimensions linked with, Z and time. What if these things no longer occupy length and width because they have no physical body, but they are able to occupy space and time and maybe something further up that would
something totally that we don't know how to measure or don't even have words for yet. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm detracting. I'm not trying to.
I don't think so at all. I thought that was I think that what you said is nail on head. There's some sort of alternate dimensions out there. I mean, even if you only are speaking of spirits and ghosts themselves, we can't physically find them most of the time. So there are other planes, right? I think what you said was nail on head. How it all works, no idea.
I wish I did too, I'm telling you. But that's part of the fun of being able to investigate and to be able to try to part these uncharted waters. I think that this is really, if they say that humanity are explorers at heart, this seems to be one of the last, besides, the oceans, besides space. This seems to be something that's solely in our backyard and that we're only beginning to kind of take seriously. And the fact that you're there in the midst of it has to be exciting. It really does.
It really is, especially now that more is being explored in the quantum world, from the quantum chips to the Hadron particle accelerator and the possible multiverse, which I believe is more probable. I think it's an exciting time. And I do believe eventually there will be a more open time for like physicists and scientists to be more open and help those of us who are not as scientifically inclined to explore this better.
As someone who has come from the halls of academia, the fact that there seems to be such an absolute stigma on those who are even just willing to entertain and look into the possibilities of this, or say aliens, whatever it may be, and they're just instantly shut down. And I know part of that is due to the tenure system and everything else, but yeah, I really hope for the day that we get over this kind of automatic ostracization that people face because of this.
Yeah, it's and we've talked to engineers and physicists who were, interested, because I think I told you once before, we put out ads. We really would like a scientist, a physicist specifically, who'd be willing to help us engineer custom gear and equipment to join our team. We have people who believe in it. They just don't want their name on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what you said is, I think, important. I believe that someday that will change.
We can only hope. I'm telling you. Have you ever walked out of a location or a part of a location because something felt just too wrong, even for you?
Even for me, yes. There's been multiple locations where we walked out of an area, where we left a section. One that sticks out in my mind is the Hand and Playhouse. There was this side room, and it's hard to explain. It's an old theater, and it was built in the late 1800s, and it went through a lot of hands. It was one of our more active investigations, especially earlier in our filming, because this team existed 10 years prior to starting to film. Mm-hmm. And I think it was one of the first nights we even had cameras, maybe the second night. And that location was lit with activity, but we went into the side room and we were totally pumped. So you have to understand, we weren't in like a super spooked out frame of mind. We were in a completely amped up, this is great. We've had knocks, we've had yells.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.
We've seen some things, but we walked into the side room with the man who owned it at the time, and it was dark through the whole place, but this room had like a cascading darkness, something that just felt like dark in a way that I don't know how else to explain. And we were only in it for a few minutes. We heard a growl, like a whirr, and I remember, I think it was Ben said, he's like, can someone turn on a light? And all of us at the same time are like, yes, please. And we all turn on the headlamps and we're looking for a light switch. And we headed back out to the body of the theater. And I think the owner, his name is Russell, and he had said that one room had like a negative experience one other time where it just had like an off vibe to him. And perhaps because, we revved up the building that night, communicating with everyone, everything that was there, whatever is lurking in that particular side room that did not feel friendly. It was just a very bad vibe. We left that. And we once just didn't do an investigation because the home itself felt evil. We're there to explore what we can scientifically measure, not to like go into darkness and communicate with it. And this particular location it was a private house in Snohomish, Washington. And there was a very evil feel to it, and we ultimately pulled the plug and didn't do the investigation.
Gotcha. Let me ask you a quick follow-up on this one. And I'm not going to attach any particular labels to this because I'm not trying to color your thoughts or lead this into a conversation which you may not want. But if there are these locations which seem a great deal darker and scarier, do you think that pure conjecture on your part, put it that way. Do you think that they are still the result of a human thing? Or do you think that this was the result of an inhuman type of thing?
First of all, ask me anything always. And that's a great question. I know that you're asking that being careful because a lot of our team is atheist, which to some people might seem strange to be ghost hunters. I know a lot of atheist ghost hunters, but I appreciate the theological perspective and questions on these things. I don't know that our team to begin with necessarily believes that most ghosts are human. That might surprise you. I don't know that we have any way to prove factually that whatever we're interacting with is human at all to begin with. Do I have an assumption that some are dead people or people in a time loop? We have an assumption with that. Do we think there's totally different entity types that we've never engaged before? We absolutely believe that. Are there good and bad people? Yes. Are there probably good and bad entities? Absolutely. Are there dogs that can be trusted and not trusted? So just in life, I think you're going to run into good and evil. And whether it's aliens, some other weird spirit type from a different dimension, human, dead or alive in a different dimension or different timeline, or currently present, but in some other universe, it doesn't seem to matter to me too much as just the fact that I think there's good people, good entities, bad entities, and bad people give me a bad vibe too. So it doesn't have to be an evil spirit per se any more than I think some people are absolutely full of their own darkness.
That is absolutely the case. And it just seems to be accelerating these days, unfortunately.
I agree.
Let me ask you one other quick question, because I'm always fascinated to hear about this. So you said that when you expressed interest in the paranormal and you started to go down this path, what were some of those early influences in your life that made you so receptive to this particular area, would you say?
Okay. I'm probably going to meander, but I will do my best to be concise.
Meander away. Welcome to my world.
Well, here's a weird situation that I remember from when I was really, really young. And my parents were super, super Christian, conservative, and none of what I'm doing now would be considered okay. But even as a child, I think my sensitivities caused them to be concerned. One time, I think I was about 5. I was either 5 or 6, and my parents were heading to this family reunion in Montana, a place that I'd never been. And before they turned up ahead on this road, we'd been on a road for hours. I was like, oh, I know where we're going. And in my mind, I think it was before I don't even know if I'd seen sepia tone before, but I saw this sepia tone memory of sorts play back in my head. And there was this outhouse that was going to be on the right-hand side of a road, and this little whirlwind goes behind it. And I told my parents, we're going to come up to this road and there's going to be this little outhouse. And they're like, oh, you've never been here before. We come up to the end of the road, take a right-hand turn. There's a little outhouse and I don't know that I told them about the whirlwind, but a little whirlwind goes behind it. I remember just I had experiences when I was young that were like a lot of children had. Sometimes I was just scared of the dark and sensitive to it. Whether or not some things were dreams or not, I'm not going to debate that with myself right now because I was young. But I do have an experience that I had when I was younger that has continued into adulthood and always made me curious about what else was out there, which was I dreamed entire days in advance. Not consistently, nor do I have any control over it. And even now it's really random when it happens. But when I don't mean I experience deja vu, I'll dream an entire day and the conversations, whether they're relevant to anything or not. And then the next day it'll play out in the exact order, including the conversations. And I also had this happen during the Japanese tsunami. So it's funny that you brought up the earthquake earlier. My sister Delana and I had gone out to dinner at Applebee's, and I was telling her while we were out to dinner that the night before I'd had a dream with big water in Asia. And she goes, what does that mean? And I'm like, I don't know. I just saw big water and bad things happening in Asia. And she's like, huh. And she did. So we get home, we're not watching TV or anything. And we come in and we flip on the news, and the moment we flipped on the TV, the tsunami was coming in live. So I always had certain sensitivities to events sometimes before they occurred. And I always was able to kind of read people as good or bad. Unfortunately, pegging them, it's also made me feel isolated in life sometimes because I'm someone who can read into the person with bad vibes before other people. So you sometimes have to be friendly in a group setting until someone else catches on to, I don't like narcissism and things like that. Who
Right.
does? But I was just sensitive, but I was also in trouble for like things a lot. And then, like even in a private Christian school, questioning God. Well, who invented God? Well, I wasn't trying to actually be rebellious. I just didn't understand how these things worked. I kind of remained that way my whole life. And then in my 20s, I took a deep dive. I studied theology, the world's top 40 religions, mostly in blip points, but eventually got a different frame of view. And during that time was also fascinated by physics and science. And I just came up with my own kind of exploring perspective where I don't claim to know anything anymore.
That's a good point of frame. Yeah, the Socratic method is always the best.
Now I know nothing. I studied
Absolutely.
so much, I don't believe I know anything.
Amen to that one. I am absolutely fascinated about a few of the things that you just said. Do you mind if I ask you a few follow-ups?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And by the way, I am not all of these dreams that you've had, which have been kind of forecasting, are they different than your normal dreams? Like you had talked about a vision which was more sepia tone. Does that apply to these types of dreams as well? Or
No, these dreams, gosh, they're all different. The tsunami one was substantially different than the days I dreamed in advance. And the sepia tone experience when I was like 5 or 6 was a waking experience. I was wide awake when this occurred. I do dream vivid, but I do also tend to recognize when I have a dream that feels like either a warning or something that I feel like might happen. I don't know how to explain it. Like I don't know that I know how to articulate it or if I have the right words for it, but I do have vivid dreams when I dream. I dream a little less now than when I was younger, but when I do, my dreams also seem to be more precise and relevant than they used to be. I have no control over it.
right. Now, the reason I ask, and I do have a method to my madness here, is when I was a kid, I always dream vividly without a question. And I've had nightmares before I can remember. My entire
Same.
family suffers from nightmares like this.
Mm.
But whenever I would dream in advance, those dreams would always be in black and white.
Oh,
And they would feature an idealized version of me. Not me as I existed then, but me as because when I was born as a baby, I was born with blonde hair and blue eyes and was skinny. And after I got my tonsils out when I was a kid, I blew up to my current size now. But in these dreams, I was always a skinny, blonde haired, blue eyed kid running around. And when you said that you had a waking vision in sepia tone, it fascinated me because I've never heard of anyone else who had talked about a distinct difference when it came to envisioning something like I have. Not that my experience means anything, but I was just really curious about that. Thank you for sharing.
no, well, it means something. I think someday we should have another discussion down the road. We could take a deep dive on this one for an hour by itself. For example, did you know that I think it's like a significant amount of people only dream in black and white? And did you know that this is a fact? Like only half of the population has an internal narrator. So I was like, well, how do they think? I don't understand how there's like people walking around without the voice in the head and narrating what they do. Even as humans, we're very, very, very different. And so maybe someday we could take a deep dive.
Yeah, actually, I do not have an internal dialogue.
You don't have an internal narrator. Okay. So you know, but I don't even understand. I can't even. How do you think?
Honestly, and I've talked about this once before, and I have the old term, photographic memory. So it's just things swim out from.
So for you, is it more pictures then?
Yeah, it is. I can picture things with amazing detail in my head. It's just in fact, when I was a kid and I started reading all of these giant fantasy books, and they always had this kind of internal dialogue going, I always wondered, is that just artistic license? Is that just a literary device? Or do people actually live like that? And I couldn't imagine it. I'm like, no. And I can still talk to myself. I can force myself to think to me, but it's not a constant dialogue. Never. It's just, I've always pictured me having like a black brain in which things bubble from the deep. And that's just how it works.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, we're all so different. Like for me, pictures come with random words, but my head is not full of pictures. It's all full of like audit. It's my own voice narrating. It's sometimes like other voices of me narrating. And I know that that's a common experience. I don't think I've heard someone explain this well as you just did, though. Like if you're not the auditory narrator type, that you do have a system. It's just yours is more visual, but you answered a question I've had for years. So that was kind of helpful.
Okay, well, good. I mean, if you're open to it, I think that this will absolutely become the first of many conversations that we will have down the road.
I hope so. I'm having a ball.
I am too, and I really appreciate you being on today. I can't even tell you. What's the most bizarre object or artifact that you've ever seen that was allegedly cursed or haunted?
That's a wonderful question. I don't know that in particular. We've been to places that I would go, oh, there's a haunted doll. No, they're on my list. There's places I would like to visit and see the legendary haunted artifacts. I mean, we've been to haunted locations and we've had people tell us something's haunted, or like museums. There's often the most active places we ever go to. Like, can I attribute it to a particular artifact? I don't know that I can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I did think of something, and then I'm going to tell you the point I was going to go to. There was one location. So there's a place called the Vintage Cafe, and it's in Everett, Washington. And they have this doll they call Kitty. And if you watch the episode, like it made meows while we were there. Like in the middle of the room, like we were like 40 feet away, and it made sounds. I think one of only 2 times we captured anything on our Connect. You know how you like reverse a Connect and use it for ghost hunting to like body map and stuff? Mm-hmm. Something like came out of the doll and looked like it was punching a team member. And she kept saying she felt wind in her face and it was like matching what the camera was showing. I don't know that it's, I wouldn't call it an evil doll. It seems to mostly be friendly. I believe its interaction was because we asked for it, to be clear.
Right.
But it was, that might be an isolated experience as far as a particular item that felt definitely haunted to me, because the venues are often just so full of history that there's lots of attachments, whether stone tape or actual hauntings. But we have a doll of our own that we named him Hector, and he's just like one of those Safeway Halloween dolls. It's on a rocking horse. You push its hand, it sings the creepy jewelry box version of Ring Around the Rosie in the way that, you would expect in a horror movie or something.
Right.
For staging purposes, shortly after getting it, we decided to take it on ghost hunts just to kind of put up and make something look spooky. We were still trying to build our intro video at the time, and we thought, oh, he's so spooky, that'd be fun to, make him rock and put it in the thing. And so we were setting up at the Seattle Georgetown Drum School, and for fun, Tally looks at the camera and she's like, all right, if someone here would like to, haunt our doll, I've always wanted a haunted doll. Now, that's actually true. Both Tally and I have always thought it would be fun to be, I don't know that I want to own one, but Tally definitely wanted to see our doll get haunted until it did, I think. So we had an active investigation that evening. And at the end of it, we were tearing down and we were all in just like a fantastic mood, cloud 9. Almost everything was back in the bags. We were down like to the last few items. And Ben had just come over in front of multiple of us and turned the doll off, like on the bottom, switched to off. It did this little thing. It usually plays the song one more time, puts it down. Ben walks down the hall and I'm standing there with Tej, who actually works at the drum school. And I'm trying to remember who was there. I think it was Tej and Danielle. Ben was just down the hall going to, get the last gear with Tally. And the doll starts going again. And all of us are just kind of like, it's rocking. And then we're like, didn't Ben just turn that off? And so we're all kind of just like looking at each other confused. And then at the very end of it, there were voices that it's not programmed to do. And we were all like, okay, what just happened? And Ben comes down the hall and he's like, did you turn on the doll again? We're like, no, did you turn it off? And we're all just, 900 miles an hour over the top of one another. He flips it over. It's definitely off. And we sort of like talked ourselves out of it later. We were curious about it, but we're like, did it glitch? And I'm like, and then we're all like, but it said something it doesn't say. And so, back in the hotel, we're just like, what was that? The next day, I kind of like let this roll off my back like water. And when we unloaded gear, I brought it back up and put it in where I had like in my living room. I have a little display case where I had a couple things for Halloween. I think Halloween was like a week away or something. So I just put it back out as the decor for that time. We leave all our ghost gear in our garages so that we don't, get a bunch of activity in our homes. But this doll I brought back upstairs. So 2 days later, Danielle comes over in the morning and we're talking about the ghost hunt stuff. And she walks into my living room with me and it giggled like and we both just paused. And she's like, is that supposed to do that? I'm like, no, it's not supposed to do that. It's not programmed to do anything like that. So Hector moved to the garage permanently. We did continue to bring it to locations, but I've recorded multiple incidents like while he was in my garage before I rehomed Hector of him turning on by himself, rocking in the garage and rocking in the garage repeatedly, which I think I sent you one of those videos where not only does he get through his routine, but stops. And then you can see like the visual, like restarting, like someone's really on a horse and going again, including like sounds of like thumps and bumps in the garage, which all have stopped since he's moved. So I do think spirits can have either fun with an item or be attached to it. But the most haunted item I've ever seen lived in my garage for a while. So
yeah, if I would have ever seen that, it would have been rehomed into a fire very quickly.
Oh, you saw that video?
Yes, I did. Yeah, we're going to have to find a way to showcase that because that is a very interesting one.
Yeah, maybe you could play it at the end of the episode or something.
I can do that. That's no problem at all. How do you tell the difference between a haunted location and one that's suffering from much more mundane issues like bad plumbing, for example?
That's a great question. The answer to that is in being a meticulous investigator. We go out ahead of time. We bring our digital voice recorders even then, and we do a sweep of the place to see what kind of sounds it's making. We ask a lot of questions. A very important thing is to make sure that you don't have people staying there during your investigation. I think that, you don't want more team members than is necessary at a location, or you can cross-contaminate. And it's better to not have staff if possible. There's some locations you're not going to be able to not have them there. If we bring staff, they're like isolated in a room. Let's say it's a museum and they have to have a curator there. Or like when we were at Tulalip and you have to have a ranger, you make sure they have a location to be and there's cameras on them. So for us, a lot of this is in sonically isolating the location ahead of time, looking into what is there, doing a good study into the history of a place, asking questions to the people claiming it's haunted to see if some of what they say just sounds like a problem with the building. Most buildings aren't producing, 20 footsteps up and down a hall naturally. And plumbing at some point sounds like plumbing, but you have to double check when you catch something that could be on our team. If something sounds like it could be something else, even if we don't think it, we're not going to include the footage. If we go into a place and it sounds like piping could have made a particular sound, we're not going to use that footage because we don't want to contaminate our own experience or our own evidence. We really want to put forward the most authentic stuff. You want really good gear. You don't want spoofy gear. You don't want apps, and you want to go around and take a look and see what sounds it could make, and also try and debunk things by seeing if you can recreate the sound. If it's that type of sound, you're not going to be able to recreate a voice over the top of you in a room, obviously. But certain gurgles or things you should really double check and debunk.
That makes total sense. Let's say that you get to the point where you feel like you have collected a phenomenal amount of evidence in support of there being a set of spirits, entities, whatever you may want to say. How would you ideally want to present that to the world? I guess
we try and pick. That's a great question. So when we put together our videos and evidence, you can't show everybody everything, right? You can't show them the whole night, and you also don't want it to be inauthentic. So we try and find experiences that stand out, that you can tell by the fact we had multiple cameras on it, are good pieces of evidence, and we try and put those forward. And so we also, if we have evidence that is so good we don't think the public will believe it, we have a file that's just for us. Like, that was so crazy, someone's going to think we staged it. So we actually have a just for us file as well. And things that are like, okay, we were there, but this is going to look sketchy to an audience. We try and leave that out. Sometimes tying together narrative, you're going to have pieces of the impressionistic experience. But what we try and focus on is telling the history at the beginning of a video, and the locations really appreciate that. We get this incredible opportunity to be in places a lot of people won't ever get to go, and to travel with each other and make core memories doing it. So we try and be responsible with the history of the location and give them a really nice intro about their venue. And then we really try and sort them the best we can, the most factual evidence that we can, and just present those pieces.
That makes total sense. And the fact that when I heard that fact that you have a set of experiences that you file away just for yourselves, that is something that you normally do not hear, especially when it comes to groups that are trying to get famous or just in it for the shock value and nothing else. And they'll put anything and everything out there, even if it's staged. And the fact that you're pulling back and going, no, you may not believe that, so we'll refrain from doing that. That makes me respect y'all even more.
Oh,
honestly.
thank you. I think it's important. And there's an author, his book's great, and he runs a ghost town in California. And he and I were talking on the phone one time, and he was like, I was like, this just happened at a venue. And I told him an experience. I can't even remember what it was right now, but it was good enough evidence that it was like one of our best personal experiences. But I know we didn't have enough cameras to present it to an audience. Like those things, like those are for us. Like, and we're not trying to get famous. If we can somehow be lucky enough to get a scientist on our team that could help us prove things, and we accidentally got famous as a byproduct, we like tolerate it, but everyone on our team is introverted, so it's not like something we're looking for. Having, our best experience, not even necessarily our best, but some of our most radical experiences that are harder to prove in a folder doesn't hurt our feelings a bit, but we don't want to. There's going to be skeptics anyways, even on your best material, even on your most obvious material, someone's going to think it's set up. So we think it's our responsibility not to release anything that could add to that.
Actually, so going off from that, what is your go-to piece of equipment in the field? And is there one that you secretly think is a waste of time, but use anyway just for the showmanship?
Okay, I'm really enjoying this question, both parts of it. So let me start with the best equipment in the field, especially for people just starting out. Like, do yourself a favor and don't go start with your EMF meters. They're fluky unless you're not moving very much and in a cemetery without electricity, or in a building that has very little or no electricity, no Wi-Fi, because they can be set off by all kinds of things. Our team
Right.
didn't even allow cell phones on during the investigation unless we're using something like a FLIR, and then you turn off all your gear that can be affected by it. So you have to be real careful. The gear that you can use from the start that everyone should have, at least one camera and a digital voice recorder. They can't be spoofed. Well, you could edit cameras, but I'm saying the most reliable equipment outside of spoofing is going to be your infrared camera and your digital voice recorder. You can catch disembodied voices. You can catch the footsteps. Maybe you'll catch something manifest in the night vision. Those are the pieces of gear I think all investigators should start with. And at the end of the day, that's what we use most, at least on our show. Oh, and
Right.
your second part was the fluky equipment. So we have what a lot of people for years thought was kind of like the Cadillac of ghost hunting gear, which is the Ovilus. You've heard of an Ovilus, right?
Yes.
Okay.
For those that haven't, can you explain it just a little bit?
Yes. The Ovilus is a piece of equipment that a lot of people own. It's also very expensive, ridiculously expensive to own. And our team all went in on one to have it because we were, our expectations were really high when we got it. But it basically takes measurements in its environment from temperature to EMF, all sorts of different variables in your environment, and it ties them to a word database. But if you move physically, you're changing that data input.
Mhm.
And if there's so many environmental factors from your body even heating up a room potentially that could trigger it to go off. And so have I ever seen an Ovilus do something that I believe? Absolutely. We only use it at the end of investigations, after 1 p.m. We start at a particular time, we end at a particular time, most of the time on our team. And so if we know we already have a show, we have more than enough obvious evidence without even looking back through our footage to tie the evening together, then we'll pull out the Ovilus. And if it goes off at the same time as another piece of equipment and what it says is relevant more than once, then we're interested. And we usually leave ours static. That's not always true. We used one at the old Idaho State Pen. But we walk really slow with it, and that place has no electricity. The building we were in has no electricity. So we were being very, very careful and mindful of how it's used. I think it's a fluky device and very expensive. If people are going to dump money into something because they want a Cadillac piece of gear, they should probably think of something more like a Kinect where you can body map. Now that's more interesting and less fallible.
I can imagine the problems that would solve. I mean, that would pose, because if you have all of these different arrays of sensors, they're all being arbitrarily mapped into a list of into a dictionary of words, and one of them changes, you're just hoping out of the chaos that you're going to get something that could be construed as proof. And that seems like a really wrong-headed way of going about things, unless it's in the most carefully constructed environment that you can think of. So I applaud you for doing that. I mean, it still is really an interesting concept, and I know that it's kind of like an advanced version of what a spirit box would be, but still it's...
Well, it's not, though. They're totally different. The spirit box is just flipping through bands of radio to make white noise. You can also use a white noise machine. A lot of people don't know that. We're even starting to experiment with just like putting a keyboard on sustain, because I think a lot of this has to do with like the spirit ability to manipulate sound.
Mm-hmm.
A spirit box is just, and if you're using it correctly, it's flipping through radio, hopefully at about 100 bands a millisecond. So, very fast at creating white noise. You could use a static machine, in our experience, and have similar results if something's active and wants to use it. The Ovilus is, it's not providing a platform for them to really speak across, unless, I guess they're very powerful and can change the temperature and the EMF. It's like, how do they know to use it? So do I ever think that an Ovilus has been manipulated by a ghost while we were there? Absolutely. And we had things like gag and justice in the or in the hanging room at Idaho State Pen. It's just like what you were saying. It's just, I think a lot of it's random, and then people try and look to attach it to something. And so we pull it out rarely. It's definitely not something that I'm ever excited to put in our footage. But if it's like a team member, if it was their only capture for the night and it's validated by other experiences, I will sometimes put it in. It's just not my favorite.
Gotcha. We
won't use apps. No apps. Because I don't know what the heck they're supposed to be measuring.
Yeah, and I've said it before. If I can't look into the source code of what an app is, I think that I got a spirit box confused with an app that ties random events to a word bank. So yeah, that was my
own. Is it like
mistake.
the Phasma box? Is that what you're talking about? Is that what it's called?
Yeah,
Phasma something? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or yeah, I think it's called a Phasma, but it's just random word generator at the end of the day.
Exactly. And yeah, that kind of irritates me to a no end, but
and anyway, so many people are starting to do that. And also inexpensive gear, you can get an infrared video camera on Amazon for like $99. And if you have 3 people and everyone spends $100, you have 3 on your team. Now you have 3 angles to prove your shots from. And digital voice recorders, if everyone's using them, you can practically tell proximity of where a spirit was. And so those are your good pieces of gear.
That sounds like solid advice to me. I love it. Thank you for listening to Southern Demonology. Find us online at southerndemonology.com, which offers links to all of our social media and episodes. Southern Demonology is solely owned, produced, and edited by myself, and the intro and outro music are composed by me as well. If you have a moment, please rate, like, and share this podcast, as it is the best way to help support my work. As always, I am JJ, and it has been a pleasure to speak to you today.
Did you know that foreign investors are quietly funding lawsuits in American courts through a practice called third-party litigation funding? Shadowy overseas funders are paying to sue American companies in our courts, and they don't pay a dime in U.S. taxes if there is an award or settlement. They profit tax-free from our legal system, while U.S. companies are tied up in court, and American families pay the price, to the tune of $5,000 a year. But there is a solution. A new proposal before Congress would close this loophole and ensure these foreign investors pay taxes, just like the actual plaintiffs have to. It's a common sense move that discourages frivolous and abusive lawsuits and redirects resources back into American jobs, innovation, and growth. Only President Trump and congressional Republicans can deliver this win for America and hold these foreign investors accountable. Contact your lawmakers today and demand they take a stand to end foreign-funded litigation abuse.